Alrighty, good morning, health champions. It is Ashley today with the weekly training session. It's Thursday, so we're wrapping up this week. It's coming to a close pretty quick here. I know mine's been a busy week so far and trying to get all my normal work done, and then of course it's tax season, so trying to get all that stuff done too before the end of next week. So hopefully you guys have gotten that all taken care of. If not, we've got a little bit more time, right? So I want to go ahead and get started here. Obviously, today we're talking about breathing techniques. And this is something that I think is incredibly helpful in a multitude of ways. So this is why I wanted to address it, because I think it's something that a lot of people can benefit from. So, obviously, most of the time, we breathe without even thinking about it, right? It's something that we just do. And therefore, we're not really conscious necessarily of the way that we actually are breathing. There are two main pattern types that I'm going to talk about here, because when we talk about different types of breathing that we're going to be discussing in just a little bit, it's important to know the distinction between these two. So the two main types are diaphragmatic, which is abdominal breathing, or thoracic, which is chest breathing. And with diaphragmatic, this is where it's a type of deep, even breathing, so that engages your diaphragm. Your diaphragm is this giant muscle that sits between your lungs and your abdominal cavity. So when you take a deep breath, it sort of pulls down and helps your lungs expand. When you exhale, it moves upward, so that way it forces the air out of your lungs, so that way you're able to, exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide, the normal process. So this is really important, because obviously your diaphragm, the muscle there, needs to be in good working order like any other muscle in order for it to function correctly. With thoracic or chest breathing, this type of breathing originates with your chest muscles, the muscles up here in your, basically in between each one of your ribs. And this is more of a rapid, short, bright breathing pattern. Often if you're anxious or worried or you're excited, that's your breathing's being driven from up here. And if we'll talk a minute about how to tell which type you're using. But the easiest way to determine that is if you put one hand on your upper abdomen, and near your waist, and the other in the middle of your chest. So when you breathe, notice which hand rises the most, essentially. If you're breathing properly here, your abdomen should expand and contract with each breath. And this is the hand on which it should rise the most. This means your diaphragm is being engaged. So, it's not like you're actually sticking your stomach out or sucking your stomach in. It just naturally breathing will cause, your stomach to move in and out. And this is why such things as good posture are important, because it allows your diaphragm to expand completely and then contract completely. So this is really important, because if you're slouching, sort of like I am at the moment, but if you actually are sitting up and you do that, and a really good way to test this is if you're laying down, because you can see it better. But if you do it when you're seated, and actually seated with a good posture, you can actually feel your hand going in and out. Versus your chest, you'll feel some rise, some fall, but it's not going to be to the extent that your abdomen should be if you're breathing correctly. And so the big thing is, why is it so important to breathe correctly? And this is because of, obviously, the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide that takes place in our lungs. This is absolutely essential for us to survive. Carbon dioxide is the waste that our cells produce, once it uses oxygen and a bunch of the other nutrients that they use. The waste product is carbon dioxide. The way our body gets rid of that is through breathing it out. So this is something that is obviously incredibly important, because we need to get rid of carbon dioxide so we can take in more oxygen, so this process can repeat numerous times within a minute, let alone however many times in a day. So this is why it's important to make sure that you're able to fully exhale, so you're getting rid of all that carbon dioxide, so that way you're creating the space for the oxygen to get in there. So, and if you think of your lungs, it's important to, I guess one way to describe it is, one of those type of screen doors with a spring that once you open it, it automatically swings back closed. So it can open and shut on its own, essentially. So that's what your lungs are like. They're like that spring door. They can open and close on their own, obviously with the assistance of the muscles. Over time, though, lungs can lose that elasticity, that springiness, if you will. So This means that they don't expand and contract as well as they should. So air can get trapped in there. And this is where essentially it's stale air. It's not oxygen rich and it's not overly high in carbon dioxide. It's sort of a mix between the two. It doesn't really help you in any way, but it's not necessarily going to hurt you in any way initially. This is a long process that takes place over many, many, many years for this to start to happen. So this means that, part of the issue is if your diaphragm's not working correctly, it's not allowing for that air to be pushed out, so you allow fresh air in there. And this also means that you're starting to have to use those other muscles in your chest, your neck, your back to actually get your lungs to expand. And it's not something that you're necessarily aware of. It just happens because your body's trying to compensate for your diaphragm not functioning the way it should. So what all this translates to is that you have lower oxygen levels and you have less reserve of oxygen for increases in activity. So this is where some people, as they're aging, start to notice they get short of breath when they try to go up a flight of stairs or do something that's more physically demanding than just, naturally walking around at whatever's a comfortable pace. So this is why employing breathing techniques helps to keep your diaphragm in good working order. The other big factor is when we're talking about breathing techniques is when you're feeling anxious or nervous, we have a tendency to take those rapid, shallow breaths. So this is important because it upsets that carbon dioxide oxygen balance within our body in, that moment. And so if you're constantly feeling anxious, you're not getting enough oxygen into your body. It's only from, you're not getting rid of the carbon dioxide, which just then perpetuates this cycle because when we don't have enough oxygen, we have a tendency to get anxious. So think of if you're holding your breath and you're underwater. And, at first it's not too bad, right? And maybe you're exhaling a little bit. And then as time goes on and on, you start to feel like this, okay, I really need some air. Essentially our body's saying, hey, we need oxygen here. Where's the oxygen? Even though you're exhaling the carbon dioxide if you're letting out little bubbles. And if you've ever been in that experience, especially if you're, not just holding your breath when you're a kid in the pool and trying to see how long you can hold your breath for, but for some reason it's, you're holding your breath because you're underwater, you start to get anxious. And so this lack of oxygen also increases the level of anxiety. So it's just this perpetual cycle that continues. So you're anxious, you start breathing faster, you don't have enough oxygen, you feel more anxious, you breathe even faster, and it just keeps going and going and going. So this is why it's important to be able to have certain breathing techniques to do that engage your diaphragm when you're feeling anxious. And the reason for that is when we're doing deep breathing, it stimulates our parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that regulates your heartbeat, your blood pressure, all sorts of things, including breathing. And this helps to calm you internally. So basically, it's the opposite of that fight-flight response that happens when you're feeling anxious. And so with diaphragmatic breathing, it helps to, slow that process, or even in some cases, stop that process and get you back to a more normal state where you're not feeling anxious, you're not breathing as fast. So this is why it's important to be able to have different breathing techniques for, not only improving the muscular function of your diaphragm, but also to make sure that when you're feeling anxious, you can do some of these breathing techniques and help calm your body down. And so this is something that I think is truly important, and that's why I wanted to talk about it today, is because I think it's a twofold benefit here. And so to me, there's obviously several different types you can practice. We're going to cover a bunch of them here in a minute, but I just wanted to really break down as far as why it's so important to have good breathing techniques that we're aware of. And when, the part of it is the more you practice, the more then your body gets accustomed to it, and the more you're going to do it without having to think about it. And that's the big thing. So we want to be able to do this without really having to consciously think about our breathing, right? That's one less thing we should have to think about. That's why it's supposed to be a function of our body that is, regulated without our conscious thought. So the key thing here is when we're trying to add breathing exercises to your day, and this is for any type. So this is why I wanted to cover this part first, is that it doesn't have to take a lot of time. and especially when you're first starting out. And it's really just about picking a specific times, either morning, middle of the day, evening, whichever your goal is for this, to be able to practice. And start with just 5 minutes every day, and then increase, the time as it becomes easier for you and you're more comfortable. And if initially 5 minutes feels like it's too long, just do 2 minutes. The key is to really start focusing on it, because it's not something we think about. And then once you get comfortable with it, you can start practicing it multiple times throughout the day. And you can do that on a set schedule, or you can practice as you feel the need. And this is where it gets back to that whole anxious concept. So this is why it's important to start thinking through as far as, when am I going to start including it? And so if a lot of people find first thing in the morning when they wake up is helpful, because it helps them, get prepared mentally for their day, because they're also thinking, besides focusing on breathing, it's a really good meditative process. Or some people need, that afternoon stress relief. So it's really about what fits into your schedule. So when we're talking about the first type, this is where it's alternate nostril breathing. And so a lot of these are derived from different types of yoga practice, because obviously in yoga there's a huge focus on breathing and how it interacts with our body. So with alternate nostril breathing is where you actually block off one nostril at a time and focus on breathing through the nostril that's open. And then you alternate back and forth with a regular pattern, so that way, you're not working one side more than the other. So it's easier to usually just do this in a seated position, and so that way you can maintain the proper posture. And so what you want to do is, just close off one nostril, and then as you're, usually it's easier because it depends on the size of your nose, but if you use your 2 fingers and then leave the others extended, it doesn't have to be rigid, but just enough that, and you obviously are alternating hands depending on which side you're doing. And you want to either close your eyes, so that way you can focus solely on breathing, or just, fixate on a point and sort of just let your vision blur a little bit. And then inhale and exhale as you're beginning. So you want to close off your right nostril, initially, if you're starting with that side, and inhale through your left. And then close off your left nostril and, exhale through your right. And then you inhale through the right, and then close that off and exhale through the left. So you keep this up through about 10 rounds of that. So obviously if you begin to feel lightheaded or anything, take a break. But the whole idea is just to help you focus on your breathing. And by forcing you to think through, actually closing off the nostril, which side are you inhaling, which side are you exhaling, it makes you focus on your breathing. And so this is something that is important, because obviously you want to make sure, when you're focusing on your breathing, that's what you're focusing on. You don't want to let your mind wander. So that's one method, the alternate nostril breathing. The next is going to be belly breathing, or diaphragmatic breathing, or abdominal breathing. Those are some of the other names for it. And so this can reduce stress and anxiety as well. A lot of these all do. That's one of the major benefits of them, in addition to training your diaphragm. So this one is especially good for training your diaphragm to work properly. And so you should do this when you're feeling relaxed and rested, not necessarily when you're in the middle of feeling anxious. There's a specific breathing technique we're going to talk about in just a minute. That's one of my favorites to deal with that. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Don't go anywhere. But with diaphragmatic or belly breathing, you want to do this about 5 to 10 minutes, 3 to 4 times a day if you're going to practice this type. And so initially it's going to feel a little weird, and then obviously it's going to become easier over time. So you want to find a comfortable place to sit or lay down, and then lie backwards, so you're in a reclined type position with your knees slightly bent. And if it's more comfortable, put your head like on a pillow, something like that, so that way it's not, on a hard surface, because you're going to be sitting there for a little bit. So, and if you need to, you can also put a pillow under your knees to support them. And then this is what we were talking about in the beginning, where you're placing one hand on your ribs, one hand on your stomach, allowing you to feel the movement. So you want to slowly inhale through your nose and feel your stomach pressing into your hand. And you want to keep your other hand as still as possible, which means when you're breathing, you don't really want to use your chest. So you're wanting to feel the movement in your stomach. And so then when you're exhaling, you want to purse your lips, so almost like you know, where you're sucking through a straw, but except you're blowing outward. As you're exhaling, your stomach muscles should be tightening, but your upper hand, the one on your chest, should still be completely still. So what this is indicating is that you're not using your chest muscles to breathe, you're using your diaphragm. So this is helpful in doing that. So if you want to make it more challenging once you get used to this, you can put a book on your abdomen, because obviously this weighs more than your hand. And that way it'll help you, increase the level of difficulty as you're trying to train your diaphragm. Once you get really comfortable with it, and you can try doing it actually sitting upright, as I was showing you before. And then that means you can obviously practice it wherever you are. You're not having to worry about lying down to do it. So this is really great for training your diaphragm to be able to function properly. So make sure that, key thing is just getting started. The next technique we're going to talk about is box breathing or 4 square breathing. And this one's pretty simple and easy to learn. Great way to understand this method is if you're listening to music and you're like inhaling, exhaling in time to the song that's on. And especially one great way to be really aware of this is if you're exercising. And when you think of if a fast-paced song is on, you're pumped up, you're moving, and you're breathing in time to that. If a more moderate-paced song is on, you're breathing into that. I know for me, when I'm working out, if depending on the intensity I'm trying to achieve, I'll pick the tempo of the music that I want to listen to, because I know my breathing gets impacted by that. So with box breathing, what you're doing here is a very specific type of paced breathing. And so you want to exhale for a count of 4. And this isn't going 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a measured count. Hold your lungs empty for a count of 4. Then inhale for a count of 4. Hold the air in your lungs for a count of 4. Exhale for a count of 4, and then you're repeating the pattern. So that's why it's called 4 square breathing, because you're exhaling for 4, holding it out for 4, inhaling for 4, holding it in for 4 before repeating the whole process. So this is helpful in helping you understand as far as, the pace and rhythmic of your breathing process. And this can help you get more in tune when your breathing pattern is more irregular than a, constant, even pattern. This next method, this is my favorite method if you're feeling stressed, anxious in the moment, and you're trying to get yourself to calm back down. And part of the reason why is because obviously when we're anxious and we don't have, we're breathing faster, we don't have enough oxygen, we have a tendency to not be aware of certain things and miss things. And so by helping your body calm back down, often when we're trying to find a solution to a problem, something like that, what this helps us do is get more oxygen into our body, which helps calm us down, which helps us to be able to focus. So that's the key thing. So this is called the 4-7-8 breathing method. And so it's also called relaxed breath. And this thing is absolutely amazing because it helps calm your nervous system. So best way to perform this one is obviously seated, get back straight, good posture. And you can, once you get familiar with it, a lot of people use this to help them go to sleep at night, because it just has that natural tranquilizing effect on your nervous system that it just helps them calm down. So first you need to be able to do it properly before you can do it laying down though. So what you want to do, the very first thing is place and keep the tip of your tongue at the ridge of tissue behind your upper front teeth. So back there. And then you want to keep it there for the duration of the exercise. So you want to completely exhale through your mouth, making a whoosh sound. Okay? And then close your mouth and inhale quietly through your nose for a mental count of 4. Then you're going to hold your breath for a count of 7. Then you're going to exhale completely through your mouth, making the whoosh sound for a count of 8. And then you're going to repeat this process. Once you get used to the process, it usually takes maybe 3 to 4 cycles of this, and you're going to feel noticeably better. So I'm going to demonstrate this one because, as I said, this is one of my favorites if you're feeling anxious. So once you exhale completely, you want to make sure that you inhale, hold, then exhale for 8. So if you do this enough, that's, as I said, it doesn't take much, and it's going to actually work really, really well. So that's going to be my challenge for you guys today, and I'll remind you at the end of the video, If you're feeling anxious today or anytime in this next coming week, make sure you try the 4-7-8 breathing method and drop it in the comments. Tell me how it worked for you. I want to hear, because I know for me, I find it incredibly helpful. Moving on, though, we're going to talk about the next type, which is referred to as lion's breath or simhasana in Sanskrit. And during this one is where you stick your tongue out and roar like a lion. And part of it is to help you relax the muscles in your face and jaw, alleviate stress. It's shown to improve cardiovascular function. Obviously, you want to do this in a seated position, leaning slightly forward with your hands on your knees or on the floor if you're seated on the floor, because that's going to help open up your lungs. And obviously, at first, you're going to feel incredibly silly, incredibly weird. So the key thing here is, remember, it takes practice. Obviously, you don't have to do it in front of anyone else, so it's up to you as far as how you want to do this. The key thing to practice lion's breath is spread your fingers as wide as possible, either on your knees or the floor. Inhale through your nose. Open your mouth wide. Stick out your tongue. Stretch it down towards your chin. And then exhale forcefully, carrying the breath across the root of your tongue, so the back of your tongue forward. When you're exhaling, you're making the ha sound from deep within your abdomen. And then you want to breathe normally for a few moments, and then repeat this up to about 7 times. So as I said, this is to help you not only with your breathing, but relax your jaw muscles, relax your facial muscles. As I said, you're going to feel a little silly at first, but once you actually practice it, then you're going to get more comfortable with it. But as I mentioned before, you don't have to do it in front of anyone else. You can do it in the privacy of your own home. The next one I want to focus on is mindful breathing. And this is really tied into like mindful meditation. And it focuses on your breathing and bringing attention to it without allowing your mind to drift off to something else. Our minds are notorious for, we start thinking about something and then we think about something else that's sort of related, and then it triggers a thought, and then we end up down this rabbit hole and we're end up, far off where we were. So the whole point of mindful breathing is to keep your focus on your breathing. So it's natural for your mind to wander. So if that happens, just gently, take a breath and refocus on the breathing. So you want to choose a sound, whether it's om, we think of a positive word like peace, or a phrase such as breathe in calm, breathe out tension, and repeat that silently as you're inhaling or exhaling. So when you're doing this, you want to let go and relax. As I mentioned, as you're, trying to repeat, the sound, your word, your phrase, whatever it is you're doing, that you want to make sure you are actually focusing on that and your breathing. And if you notice your mind has wandered, gently return it to, whatever your word, your phrase, whatever it is that you are actually supposed to be thinking about. So the next one we're going to talk about is pursed lip breathing. And so this helps you to take deeper breaths that are slower and more intentional. And this has also been helpful for people who have anxiety, but it's really helpful for people who have emphysema or COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And the reason for that is because of the way it helps you take deep breaths. It helps get more oxygen into your lungs, expand your lungs. So obviously, you want to be seated in a comfortable position, nice relaxed shoulders. You want to keep your mouth closed and inhale slowly through your nostrils for about 2 seconds. And then you're going to exhale through your mouth for 4 seconds, puckering your lips as if you're giving a kiss. So once again, that's that pursed lip breathing concept. And then keep your breath slow and steady while you're breathing out. So once you get this down, experts are recommend, especially for individuals with emphysema and COPD, to practice this about 4 to 5 times a day. So once again, you're going to, relax. And it's almost like you're blowing out to blow out a candle, blow out a straw, blow out something like that, because what it's doing is it's forcing air out through a small space. So it's causing you to have to exhale and expand your lungs. So that's why it's important to keep that in mind. And it's a great technique for those who have, some form of chronic lung disease. So the next is resonance breathing, or coherent breathing. And it can help you get into a more relaxed state and reduce anxiety. So for this one, you want to lay down, close your eyes, gently breathe in through your nose with your mouth closed for a count of 6 seconds. So don't fill your lungs too full of air. So you're not trying to take a deep breath in those 6 seconds, just normal, regular breathing. And then you want to exhale for about 6 seconds and let your breath leave your body slowly and gently without forcing it. And then you want to continue this for up to 10 minutes. So this one takes a little bit longer than some of the others. And then after you're doing that, take a few additional minutes to just be still and focus on how your body's feeling, because this helps you create that awareness of what's going on. So this is where, you're breathing and you're focusing on it, but you're not necessarily taking deep breaths. It's more just to help you have a body awareness factor. So the next one is breath focus technique, and this one is a deep breathing that uses imagery or focused words or phrases. So it's similar to the mindful one, but this means you can focus on a variety of different words. You're going to focus on starting with 10-minute sessions and gradually increase the duration up to about 20 minutes. So it's the same idea that way, except you're going to alternate between normal breathing and deep breathing versus just focusing on breathing nice, normal, and even, which was the mindfulness breathing technique. So you want to notice any differences between the normal and deep breathing. Notice how your abdomen expands more with deep breathing versus obviously normal breathing. And then you're going to feel how shallow regular breathing feels compared to deep breathing. So then once you've compared the two, you want to practice deep breathing for a few minutes. And then this is, once again, you're placing your hands on your stomach and on your chest, and notice how it rises and falls. Then, after you've done that for a few minutes, let out a loud sigh with each exhalation. So this way that you're seeing how your body responds to all this different input. And then as you're doing this, you're going to start thinking about, once again, pick a word, a phrase, a mental image of something that you're focusing on as you're breathing. And so, you can say your word or phrase out loud, softly, or you can imagine that as you're exhaling the air, all your tension and anxiety is going away because you're breathing it out. So this is where, with the breath focus technique, it's very much more involved as far as what you're focusing on, rather than just focusing on a particular word or phrase. That, this you're actually focusing on your breathing, the differences between the breathing. You're focusing on, how your body's feeling from all that, and then you're also focusing on your word or phrase as well. So equal breathing is known as Samavrti in Sanskrit, and this breathing technique focuses on making your inhales and exhales the same length. So you want to help make sure that they're smooth and steady, both inhaling and exhaling. So you should find a breath length that's not too easy but not too difficult, and you also don't want it to be too fast. So it says it's somewhere between about 3 to 5 counts. So if you're counting, it's 1, 2, 3, something like that. So once you get used to it while seated, you can do it obviously throughout the day during regular activities. So first you want to obviously get into a comfortable seated position. You want to breathe in and out through your nose, and then you're counting during each inhalation and each exhalation to make sure that they are even in duration. So if you're counting to 3, that's for inhalation and exhalation. If you're going to 5, same thing. You want them to be the same. And you can also repeat a word that you say during inhalation or exhalation. Obviously, hopefully by repeating the same word, it's going to be the same amount of time, because you should be saying the word at the same rate. And you can add a slight pause or hold your breath after each inhalation and exhalation if you feel comfortable. Remember, normal breathing actually involves pauses. We're just not aware of them. Also, when we're speaking, there's natural pauses because we're breathing and we're talking. So that's normal for this to occur. So don't be alarmed if you feel that you need to pause or you'd like to pause. And then the other thing is you want to do this for about 5 minutes. So that's something that's also important to keep in mind. The next one we're going to talk about is Sitali breathing. It's a type of yoga practice that's supposed to help lower your body temperature and relax your mind. And so there's a slightly extended breath in length, but you don't want to force it. So here you're going to inhale through your mouth, and then you're going to be by sitting in a comfortable position. So you stick out your tongue and curl your tongue to bring in the outer edges together. So like where you're rolling your tongue in. If your tongue doesn't do this, you can purse your lips. Not everybody's tongue does that. You're going to inhale through your mouth, exhale through your nose, and then you're going to continue breathing like this for up to 5 minutes. And so it's supposed to help you, as I said, get your body temperature lower, relax your mind, because obviously you're having to focus on keeping your tongue rolled or your lips pursed. So could be a great technique for that. And deep breathing helps to relieve shortness of breath by preventing air from getting trapped in your lungs and helping you breathe more fresh air. So with this you can do seated or standing. You want to draw your elbows back slightly to help expand your chest. And you're going to take a deep breath in through your nose. Keep your breath in for a count of 5, and then slowly release your breath through your nose. So this is great if you're feeling short of breath, even if you're not exerting yourself. But if you're exerting yourself, this is a great way. One of the things I do when I'm doing cardio, if I'm starting to feel like I'm short of breath because I'm really exerting myself, that's where I really focus back in on my breathing. And otherwise, I end up with horrible, painful side stitches because I'm not breathing right. So this is one of those techniques that you can do when you're actually breathing that's, can be very helpful as far as focusing and getting your breathing back under control. Next one is the Hummingbi Breath. And this one is a unique yoga practice to create an instant calm. So it can be used to help relieve frustration, anxiety, anger. It does involve a humming sound, so making sure, it's up to you if you want to be around others when you're doing it. So start with a comfortable seated position. Keep your eyes closed, relax your face, place your first fingers on the cartilage that covers part of your ear canal, this little tab here. And inhale. And as you exhale, gently press your fingers into the cartilage. So push in. So basically, you're blocking off your ears. Keep your mouth closed and make a loud humming sound. And then you continue that for as long as you're comfortable. So basically, you're going to inhale. And so if you can actually feel the vibration in your ears, in your lips, all that. And so that's where it helps you to focus on the humming. And so that means it's going to relieve, anxiety and all that because you're tuning out everything else essentially. Next one and last one is the simple breathing exercise. And this you can do as often as you want. You can do it standing up, sitting, lying down, whatever's comfortable. So this, you want to inhale slowly and deeply through your nose. Keep your shoulders relaxed. Your abdomen should expand and your chest should move very little. As you're exhaling slowly through your mouth, you blow out the air, purse your lips slightly, but keep your jaw relaxed. You might hear a soft whooshing sound. That's normal. And then repeat it. And you can do it for several minutes, until you start to feel better, whether you're anxious, whether you feel like you don't have enough oxygen. So this is a very simple one. You're not really focusing on any particular aspect of the breathing. You're not necessarily holding it for any length of time. So this is just a very simple technique to help you get you started. So obviously most of these you can do right away. You can start putting them into practice today, which I think is the cool thing about breathing exercises is once you learn the process, then you can just start. The nice thing is there's plenty of them, so if you don't like a particular one, you can try a different one and find the one that best suits you. So it takes a little bit of experimentation to find that sometimes, but you definitely need to set aside time to dedicate to this. And that way, once you get used to it, you can just do it throughout the day without having to really think about it that much. Just be aware of, what's going on with your body. And that's something that I think is so crucial, and that's these breathing techniques help with, is creating a level of body awareness that we don't normally have. And by having that, we're able to better prepare for different things, we're better able to understand our body, and we're better able to regulate it. So this is something that I think is super critical, super awesome though. And once again, this is your reminder. I want you to try the 4-7-8 breathing technique. So if you need to, go back to that section of the video to get the instructions on how to do it. And at some point, either today, this week, try it out. If you're feeling anxious, you're feeling upset, and then let me know in the comments, send me a message as far as, how it impacts you. How did it help, if it did, if not, and then I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Otherwise, thank you guys for joining me today. Hopefully all this information was helpful and you guys are able to actually put it into practice. You guys have a great rest of your week. Have an awesome weekend. And I will see you next week.